Hi, I'm Ann Marshall with Art, Archetype, and Ancient Wisdom, and I'm delighted to be with Marian Zielinski today. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence, and I know we're going to have an exciting conversation. A brief introduction is that I know you live in Macon, Georgia,
That's correct.
and that you work in fiber and surface design, acrylic, mixed media, and digital composition. It's quite a smorgasbord. And you come from a rich background of theater costume design. And I know that you focus on light and space and shape and color galore. And you have a very rich and lengthy history of teaching, being honored in prestigious juried shows and publications. So thank you for being here. Is there anything that's important that we might want to add to that?
Well, I just want to thank you for that lovely introduction and for having me here in the first place. I'm deeply honored. Thank you for including me.
It is our treat. And, in that last line talking about the juried shows and exhibitions, I know you're coming off of an incredible experience regarding that. Can you
Right.
share your recent activity in
Right.
accolades?
Right. So in 2021, I won a merit award at Artfields, which is this amazing experience in art in Lake City, South Carolina. The community gets together and they host this amazing all art show. And it's the show that is the spinoff invitational is called Southern Voices Global Visions, and that show just opened last weekend. And it was just such an amazing celebration. It included not just the Artfields winners, but invitationals to the South Art Prize winners and the South Art Fellows. So it was just this amazing collection of artists who were so warm and welcoming, and it included music and Southern foods, and it was just a celebration of the whole art world. It's given me so much positivity, and it's given me such a clear direction about how I fit into it all. And that's been what's been driving me this week in terms of getting started and moving back after a time of, let's say, not too much productivity.
I think to experience both clarity and excitement is is like a golden ticket. So
Oh, it
that
is.
is
It is.
wonderful. But you mentioned music, and I know you've used music in your artwork. Can you kind of tell us a little bit how that has influenced you?
Well, being in the theater, it's this five-dimensional experience. For much of my life was involved and immersed in this. So sound is an important part of it. And sometimes there is a particular sound or style of sound that sort of works together with the visual flow. And so I think about all the things that I use, like or influenced by light and texture and color. And I'm a water baby. I swim every day if I can. And so this idea of flow and movement is something that is really at the heart of my work. It comes from the theater, in that you have to be in the present moment. Otherwise, it's not really truly a live experience. You have to be so deeply immersed and engaged in that activity. And I get that from swimming, but I also get that from making art. And music is the sound equivalent of the swim, if you will, of being in this visual dance, but also well, it is a dance, isn't it? Uh, this back and forth engagement. And so stylistically, if there is something that is resonant, I will play that style of music throughout the duration of making the piece. That said, sometimes I just get so engaged. It's it's not necessarily a thing, or if maybe it's not possible because it's in a place where I'm making that doesn't allow that possibility. But it seems to help with the engagement in the moment. So music, and it's all part of it.
That's interesting because I just had an experience this morning, as a matter of fact, where I had had a dream a couple of nights ago looking for symbol, and what came to me was drums, like African drums.
Right,
So
right.
this morning I was working on a piece of art and I was playing some African drum, and it was like, well, this is a really interesting experience, but there felt a little discordant between the African drum genre, if you will, and the piece that I was working on. It was like, is this working or not working? So
Well,
just
you'll find the repetition in pattern and form, and so maybe that might have been what was speaking to you. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same style of a period or the same style of a location. It just has to be something that you may not on a conscious level note. So maybe something speaking to you on a deeper level, unconscious level.
yeah,
True.
and when we get into unconscious and pattern, that's where I get totally turned on. I love that, but I see that in your work too. Like you talk about seeing something or uncovering some small truth. Is that an intention or just an accidental outcome in your artwork?
Well, I think it's both. I think sometimes it is the seeing that is the trigger, but sometimes you find those triggers just by playing. And when you're playing, and then suddenly it's like, oh, and then yes, that, oh my goodness. And then it's like, fireflies in your head. They're just triggering all of these ideas and connections and insights sometimes. But sometimes just allow yourself to play, because sometimes it really doesn't come until the end, and it's like, oh my goodness. I mean, there were some pieces that just I didn't see it until it's like it's there, it's done, it's and aha.
Hmm.
And so sometimes.
So does that take, like, do you have a piece sit on the wall for a while before you recognize what is necessary next, or that you realize that it's actually complete? Does it sit there
Yes,
for a while?
I'm just going to say yes. Sometimes you just have to let it sit. Sometimes it says, I'm ready, mom. Take me home.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, so
Uh, Go ahead, I didn't mean to.
I think knowing when a piece is done, or knowing trusting that your editing is on point, is a hard task for an artist, to get to the point where, okay, it's all play, and now what? And you have to learn what it is you like. You have to learn who you are, and you have to be able to I guess it's called editing, because it's taking away, it's adding, it's this interaction with yes and no that a good piece has to have, I think.
Mhm. Does that go along the lines of artistic voice as well, would you see?
Well,
Like knowing who you are and
yes,
what you're
yes,
bringing?
yes, yes. Yes, that's the hard question for the artist. Learning who you are, because it takes a lifetime. Everything you do, every step of the way, is a part of building that voice. And we are so influenced by all the things that we see, the beautiful work behind you. Okay, oh my goodness, yes, I see that. But that is so you and not me. I mean, me is something else altogether. And so I have to learn to appreciate, to know what it is that I love about what I'm seeing in your work. But also I need to be able to not take it, not certainly I'm going to be influenced by everything I see, but to be able to say, this is where it comes from. This is where I might take it. This is, I mean, if you think about my background in theater, it wasn't until very recently that I rediscovered that the new work that I want to do has to do with places that maybe aren't realistic, spaces that are mythic, spaces that are dream worlds for me, that take some of the realistic input into it, but that are more evocative. And so I think, going back to my roots, finding, who I am and how I got there and why I'm where I am now, and what it is that gives me a unique way of seeing the world. I can't be anybody else. This is
Mm.
who I am. And that's what makes art true. That's what makes art new. It's the confluence of only this identity, and your identity is a whole other world.
Mm.
I mean,
Mm.
if you think about it, it's just so immense, these worlds that we create.
Well, I think that's a perfect lead in. What I'd really like to do, because your work is so beautiful and it speaks so much for itself, I think if I do a brief screen share on your website, that might give people
Okay,
a great
sure,
entryway into looking at your work. So
sure.
this might be just a little bit awkward because I don't do this too gracefully, but let's see. Oh, that wasn't too bad. So this is on the homepage of your website. We're
Right.
sliding through a couple pieces of your work, and I think, what's so noteworthy is the light and the color and the shape,
Right.
that you continue to utilize and
Mm-hmm.
draw.
Mm-hmm.
If I go down to this Providence Canyon for a moment, you can
Mm-hmm.
see at the bottom the different themes, if you will, of your artwork, and just clicking on one. Um, and looking at, I don't know if I have to back in and out each time or not. I might, which
Yeah.
I'm,
I think there's on the side. Yeah, I think on the side you can.
okay, yeah,
And that's one of the pieces that's at that just opened at Southern Voices Global Visions.
got it, okay.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, just really terrific. I mean, the texture and the color. I know you use a different medium, and do you have a favorite?
Well, I have just this is from a series that I was working primarily digitally. It was a new media for me, and it's probably my longest series. Right now there are 15 pieces in it, and
Mm,
it really was influenced very strongly by environmental concerns that, well, and also it has a lot to do with mortality, but they were inspired by Providence Canyon, which is a park, a state park in Georgia that was created by poor farming practices at the turn of the century. And so there are these real gorgeous canyons, and rusted vehicles that can't be removed
mhm,
because they're on
mhm,
the hiking trails
mhm,
surrounding the ridge of the canyon, and they could be removed, but they would cause more environmental damage. And this motif of this cultural icon of how we, strive as a people to be creative and to live these lives full of adventure and meaning, and yet we have this natural world that's needing our focus and care. And so I thought, what a wonderful set of images and motifs to put together to to speak. I mean, as we get older, we feel the rust in our body and the bruises um,
mm.
the zippers and the scars and all that. And so there is tremendous beauty here, and
I,
I just enjoyed very much doing that series.
And let's just take a quick look then, as well as some of the new work here,
Mhm.
looking at how you've evolved. And if
I
you'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, I was working with passage of time as dealing with ideas of past, present, future, and about how in terms of time you're dealing with not just a given moment. Yes, you're in the present, but you have memory, you have projection, you have all of this in one. And so not it's dealing with time not as a linear function, but also narrative. That one's my self-portrait. And it's actually done by it's a charcoal drawing that I digitized and layered with a couple of other drawings. And
Mhm.
it is about how we take inspiration from the world, and then our expiration as artists is what we put back into the world. And so that's I just wanted to do a self-portrait because, well, I can.
Mm.
And then I was also very much influenced by text and textures. And so this is blending the computer, blending the machine text of manhole covers with graffiti on the street. And so I'm very influenced and interested in textural pieces and its
Mm.
connection to fiber, how textile and the word text come from the same root. And it's about
Mm.
storytelling.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
This one's called In the Game, and it's a blend of fabric that I created whole cloth and then cut up and then oh, okay. And
That's
then also I did some train graffiti imagery photographically and blended it with some of my digitally created textiles.
mm.
It's talking about mediated experience as opposed to embodied, engaged interactions.
Let's just maybe do one more.
Okay.
Wow, this is beautiful.
This is called How an Alphabet is Born, and it's blending photographs and uh, uh, digitally created pieces as well as hand created lino cut uh, textures and images.
Thank you so much for that. I know
You're
that
welcome.
was just a teeny weeny little sneak preview. And especially in that newer work, I'm kind of seeing, well, and it's not just the newer work, but I do recognize a lot of the archetypal images, and I'm wondering, if there's anything there that you work with or that you resonate with that you could address.
Well, in terms of archetypes, I was taken with that back in college when I was studying psychology, and I was all about that. I thought I might be a psych major, but then I wasn't crazy about the statistics. So I did a lot of reading with Carl Jung and actually a lot of mythology. I'm very much influenced by that, and part of that comes from the fact that theater roots
Mm,
come from the ancient Greeks and Romans, and so uh, and then pretty much every character that's ever been created has something of archetypes in them. But I was really interested in Jung's the animus and the anima and the identity and the shadow and the merging of all of these. And then even corporate America has split them off into, types that are being used for all kinds of purposes. But it comes back to character and identity and who we are. And so I've been working quite a bit with identity. And I like to think that and I think some of the best characters are not just all one archetype. I think we have this tremendous blend of figures that we are. And I love to see the depth and the rich layers and the evolution of characters as we tell stories. And so I think some of my future work will be will have to do more with time as well as characters and how they change over time, clearly. So aging is not as bad as it seems. It has its perks as well as its tribulations, but we deal.
mm,
I was at a doctor's office, and there was a fellow sitting there, and he said to me, you just play the hand you're dealt. And I said, that's good advice for the world. So
Hmm. And that kind of goes back to being in the flow.
exactly, exactly. And yeah, but there are some things that you do just have to address and deal with, and when you're ready, come back. So
Hmm. Now, do you have any mentors? Somebody that really made a difference in your art life?
I know this may seem simplistic, but I'm going to have to say my husband. Now,
Hmm.
we met here at Mercer. When I was teaching at Mercer. He is a philosophy of communication person, and it was interesting because when we struck up conversations, this was when we were just first getting to know each other, we found that we had so much in common in terms of how we thought, that there's this sort of phenomenology where we can let ideas just go in so many different directions. And he introduced me to continental philosophy, and that reverberated particularly in the works of Maurice Merleau-Ponty and Gaston Bachelard. Now, Gaston Bachelard was a physicist who became a philosopher of place, interestingly enough, and he wrote about the elemental energies, and those kinds of things were just so powerful to me. How earth and wind and fire and water I mean, this piece back here, the one that you showed on the screen earlier, it's called Blue Lava. I mean, it's about flow, but it is also about the movement of lava. It's a movement of fire, and how you blend those elements together to create a feeling of flow. And it's
You
not
know,
just in the opposition, but in the apposition, the togetherness of those flows.
hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that piece in particular reminds me of pour painting. I don't know
Mhm. Yeah,
if you,
that's where it came from, actually. Yes.
and
Yes.
I'm like, how can I reproduce pour painting into quilting? And here you have been successful at,
Well, yeah, digitization is your friend here, because you can do it, but it really is a much harder to quilt unless you do digitize it.
Yeah.
If you transfer it to a fabric, and then you can add things and clean things, and then you can layer things, and you've got even more than just your pour painting.
Mhm. I
So.
can't imagine your studio must have incredible resources and diverse.
Well, I actually have several studios. It started with just when we built our house, we built a bonus room, and it had my computer and it had my drawing tables, because I was still designing for theater then, and had my sewing machines and all of that in that. But I was having surgery about, oh gosh, I guess it was 20 some years ago. And I'm thinking, as they're rolling me in on the gurney, I've had a great life, and if I don't make it, I wish I had a swimming pool. And so when I woke up from the surgery, I told this to my husband, and he looked at me and he said, on one condition. He said, what's that? When we dig up the yard, we're going to put in a studio for you. And I thought, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. So I have a wet studio outside that is our sort of our pool house. And so I have a swimming pool where I can swim out when things are drying. And then I have my fiber studio still in the bonus room. And now I'm expanding our dining room to include my computer studio. So I have like 3 spaces that are mine.
Wow,
So
wow, how terrific to have the support,
yes,
of
yes,
your husband really
yes,
as your backbone there. Oh,
yes.
geez.
Mhm.
Now, d- I hope this isn't like a loaded question, but do you teach classes?
Well, I taught for so many years, and then I did, after I retired from teaching and moved into art. I did one workshop for the Studio Art Quilt Associates Georgia, South Carolina workshop, because they wanted something to do with some of the painting techniques and printing techniques that I did, and so that was fun. I typically don't do that anymore. It's just takes so much time to prepare, and it really, I mean, you have no idea how much time it takes to prepare, because it's the packing, it's the ordering, and so I really don't do that as much anymore. But I did many years of it. So I actually taught a fiber class that I introduced at Mercer as part of a studio class that was cross-listed in theater and in the art department. And it took many of the surface design techniques that I learned in not just in costuming, but in scene painting and printmaking. And I always take art classes whenever I can. And I just incorporated them into a class that I taught for many years until my retirement. So, no, I don't teach anymore.
Yeah, and I'll make sure that the resources as to, how to access the website and your social media and anything else that you would like for people to be able to get a hold of are available here. Um, Now, in terms of your work, do you draw it out first, or like how do you start with something?
All
Once you
different
have the idea,
ways.
all different
Yeah,
ways.
all different ways. Sometimes, I mean, I have to say that I have a sketchbook that I've kept for many years. It's still not filled, but it has the interesting thing about it is that the sketchbook, when I do have an idea that I want to remember something about, I'll do a quick pen drawing or something just so that I have the idea, and I'll write a lot of stuff about it. And then I have this collection of things, and I see some things resurfacing now that are really helping me to articulate that artist statement that we talked about earlier, about what it is that just keeps coming back. And it's an important clue. But there are times when I'll just start with cutting, or start with stitching, or start with painting something, and then it's just the next step in the process. Or maybe I want to revisit, oh my God, my mother's taught me smocking back then, and I want to see if my thumbs can still do the knitting, and how I might incorporate some weaving, or so it's all about what it is that's the next trigger. I have a sketchbook that I've just started now for figural work. I want to get back to doing some figure drawing and include that in some of my places work, but also text. We were talking about texture earlier, so um, uh, writing about it and drawing about it. It's all good. As a matter of fact, I started keeping a notebook aside my bed when I can't sleep, because usually it's because I have an idea that's wanting to pop out. And if I don't write down the words, or sometimes it's just a title. An interesting thing that I sometimes do when the title's not coming is I'll put it up on the wall when it's finished or almost finished, and I'll be walking through, and something will come, and I'll write it on the pad, or my husband might have an idea, he'll write it on the pad, and it's just great fun, because we get to talk about what we're seeing in the pieces together, and we have some lovely coffee talks. So.
You are such an encyclopedia of experience and texture and ideas, and the amount of work that the body of work that you've accumulated over time is just so significant. It's very inspiring. And in coming to the close of our time together, and I know that we could go on quite a while because you do have so much to offer, and I just love the way your brain works. It's like endless. um, and the evolving that you're going through as well. But what would you want the world to know? Like, what's important for you to get across, maybe as the close of our time together?
I usually don't have wide sweeping advice, but the one thing that I know that works for me is that if I'm open to the world is open to me. And so that's what feeds. It goes back to that self-portrait, where inspiration and expiration is about respiration. It's about being in the world, bringing the world in and letting the world out, the world in here out, and the natural world in. And so that would be my my one sage bit of
Mm, And it,
advice.
and it brought that word flow back for me as well. So that seems like one of your really consistent themes that
That's
you
great.
have been very prolific about and get across, and um, the respiration of in and out, the ebb and flow. Didn't you have a show, Ebb and
Yes,
Flow?
yes, yes, yes. An
Wow.
important concept.
Oh, Marian, and any last words? I just feel like we could go on. It's hard to put a stop to this because
Right,
that
right.
ebb and flow is endless.
Well, again, I just want to thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you, because I enjoyed meeting you, and I wished we had more time back when we first met in Florida. And so I appreciate you, and I appreciate your work and taking the time to talk to me, and your patience with making this happen. So
I'm sure there'll be more encounters to come, and thank you so very much. And make sure, viewers, that you check out the resources available.
okay.
Thank you, Marian.
Thank you, Anne. Have a great day.